The first thing I noticed when I came back to myself wasn't the pain. It was the smell of Tim Hortons coffee, that specific burnt caramel smell that only exists in hospital waiting rooms and gas stations off the 401, and the sound of someone trying very hard not to cry. I opened my eyes slowly, the way you do when some part of your brain already suspects the news isn't good. The ceiling above me was the aggressive white of a place that doesn't want you getting too comfortable. Fluorescent light, beeping to my left, and sitting in the chair beside the bed with a double-double in both hands and her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead like she'd forgotten. They were there was Ruth Ann LeClaire. My ex-girlfriend's aunt, not a nurse, not my mother. Not anyone from the short list of people I'd have expected to be sitting next to me, while I figured out which parts of my body still worked. Ruth Ann LeClaire, who made tourtière from scratch every Christmas Eve and once drove 2 hours in a February snowstorm just to bring Celeste birthday cake at university because she didn't want her to spend it alone. She realized I was awake at the same moment I realized she'd been crying. Her face went through 3 expressions in about a second: relief, guilt, and something I can only describe as bracing for impact. "Hey," she said. Her voice was wrong. Too careful. I tried to answer. My throat felt like I'd swallowed a handful of gravel from the TransCanada. She was already reaching for the plastic cup on the bedside table, the one with the bendy straw that made me feel 9 years old. I took it because near-death situations, apparently, have a way of making a man forget his pride entirely. I'm 31. I run a small electrical contracting company out of Barrie, Ontario. Residential work mostly, the occasional commercial job, when I can get it. I drive a white Ford Transit that needs new tires every winter and makes a sound when I accelerate that my mechanic keeps calling character. I pay rent. I forget to call my mother until she texts me 3 times. I am by most definitions a functional adult who can handle things. In that hospital bed, I felt completely 12. "What happened?" I managed. Ruth Ann set down the coffee. "There was an accident." That explained the ceiling, the wires, the heavy weight along my right shoulder, the fact that my left wrist felt like it belonged to someone who'd lost an argument with pavement. "What kind of accident? Your van?" She paused. "Black ice on Dunlop Street. They think you hit the concrete divider near the Bayfield intersection." She glanced toward the door. "The police report's still being put together. Police report." That phrase did something unpleasant to my stomach. "Ruth Ann." I looked at her. Really looked. "Why are you here?" She went completely still. That was the thing about Ruth Ann LeClaire. She was a woman who could organize a church fundraiser, negotiate a return at Canadian Tire without a receipt, and cook for 14 people without breaking a sweat. But she could not hide a feeling. Never could. Right now, her face was doing something complicated, something that lived right at the edge of what she wanted to say and what she was afraid to. "Someone called me," she said. "Who?" A nurse came in before she could answer. Young woman, dark ponytail, lanyard that said Kezia. She ran through the standard question. Name, year, where was I? I told her I was in RVH, and judging by the draft coming from somewhere, someone had left a window cracked in February. She smiled at that, asked about pain. I told her the truth, which was that my shoulder felt like someone had driven a truck into it, and then immediately recognized that might be accurate. After she left, Ruth Ann folded her hands in her lap. She had the look of someone who had been sitting with a sentence in her mouth for hours and wasn't sure which word to start with. "Ruth Ann," I said again. "Who called you?" She closed her eyes. Celeste did. The monitor beside me made a small, embarrassing comment about my heart rate. Celeste LeClaire and I had been together for 3 years. We broke up 14 months ago. Not because we'd fallen out of love. I wished it had been that clean. We broke up because she'd been accepted into a landscape architecture graduate program in Vancouver, and I'd told her she should go. She'd told me she didn't want permission. She'd wanted me to say without flinching, without my voice going careful and managed, that I wanted her to stay. I didn't say it. That was the short version. The long version didn't make me look any better. I remembered now that I'd been in the van when the ice hit. I remembered my phone had been on the passenger seat, face up. I remembered seeing a notification just before Dunlop, a text. Just her name on the screen. My chest did something involuntary. "She texted me," I said. Ruth Ann's fingers tightened on the coffee cup. "She called you first. She says she tried 3 times. The last thing I'd been thinking, before everything went sideways and loud, and then nothing, was that I was going to pull over to read it. That I wasn't going to be the kind of man who read texts while driving. I was going to find a Tim's, park, and read it properly, because it had been 14 months of silence, and if Celeste Leclerc was reaching out to me, I wasn't going to ruin it by being careless. I didn't make it to the Tim's. Is she? I stopped. I had to ask the question slowly because I was genuinely afraid of the answer. Was she in the van? No. Ruth Ann shook her head quickly. No, she's not. She wasn't with you. Is she okay? She's here, Graham. And then she stopped and looked at the door, and her eyes filled. Wait, here as in the hospital. She's been in the waiting room since they brought you in. For a long moment, I just lay there, trying to understand the architecture of that sentence. Celeste Leclerc, who had every reason in the world to be living her life in Vancouver without me, had been sitting in the waiting room of Royal Victoria Hospital in Barrie, Ontario, waiting to find out if I was going to be okay. The door opened. She was standing there in a gray wool coat that still had the tags on from wherever she'd bought it, in a hurry, dark jeans, winter boots that weren't properly laced. Her hair was up in that messy way she always called temporary and then forgot about for the rest of the day. There was a crease on her cheek from wherever she'd been leaning. She looked exhausted. She looked furious. She looked more like herself than anyone I'd seen in over a year. We stared at each other for a second that lasted considerably longer than a second. Her eyes moved over my face, my shoulder, the monitor, the wrist brace. She was trying to look like she'd already processed the worst of it and was fine now. I could see the exact moment she didn't quite succeed. Her jaw set, one sharp breath through her nose. Then she reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out a granola bar. They didn't have anything decent in the vending machine, she said. It's oats and honey. I know you hate the ones with chocolate chips because you said they were trying too hard, which is the most you thing I've ever heard. I stared at her. That was it. No, I'm glad you're alive. No, you scared me. No 14 months of unsaid things. A granola bar and an explanation of my own preferences back to me. There's nothing wrong with having standards, I said. Her mouth did something that almost became a smile. It's a granola bar, not a wine list. Ruth Ann made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been a sob, or both. Celeste came closer. She pulled the chair beside my bed and sat down in it the way you sit when you're pretending you're not relieved. Her coat was still buttoned. She hadn't let herself get comfortable yet. How's your head? She asked. Full of questions. That's new. That's fair. We looked at each other. There was a whole geography between us. The year of silence, the thing said badly, the one thing I hadn't said at all. It sat around the bed like weather. Your shoulder, she said, nodding toward the brace. Separated. You also cracked a rib. Your wrist is just bruising, they think, but they're doing another scan. You got the rundown. I was in the waiting room for 4 hours. I asked someone eventually. You could have left. She looked at me steadily. I could have. She hadn't. Ruth Ann stood up abruptly. I'm going to find a real coffee. This one's cold. She pointed at Celeste without looking at her. Tell him. Celeste's jaw tightened. Tante Ruth. He should know. Ruth Ann picked up her coat. She paused at the door and looked at me for a moment, with the expression of a woman who had been hoping this would happen for some time. For what it's worth, Graham, you sounded very different on the phone this time. Then she left, and the room rearranged itself around the two of us. I let the quiet sit for a moment. Celeste and I had been good at quiet once. Comfortable quiet. Sunday mornings with the radio on low, her reading and me looking over estimates at the kitchen table, summer evenings on the back step when neither of us needed to fill the space. This quiet was something else. Sharper. More aware of itself. She said you called me, I said. 3 times. Celeste looked at her hands. I did. Why? She didn't answer right away. She reached up and pressed the back of her knuckle against her cheek, checking the crease from earlier, the way you do when you're thinking. I finished my program, she said finally. In December. I've been back in Barrie since January. I hadn't known that. I was going to text you, she said. I kept drafting it and deleting it. Then I ran into your mother at Zier's 2 weeks ago, and she told me you'd started a new crew, that things were going well. She said you seemed. She stopped. She said you seemed like you were trying. My throat did something I wasn't prepared for. I called because I wanted to ask if you'd want to get coffee. She said it quickly, like getting the words out before something could stop her. That was the whole plan. 15 minutes of coffee. I wasn't trying to reopen anything. I just. She stopped again. I missed talking to you. You called 3 times. The first 2 I hung up before it rang. The third one went to voicemail. She finally looked up. You never called back. I was on Dunlop Street. Her eyes filled, fast and unwilling. She blinked it back down. I know, Celeste. I said her name carefully because I wasn't sure I'd be able to say it without my voice doing something embarrassing. What did you say? In the text. She was quiet. I asked if you'd seen the new place on Collier Street. The breakfast one. I said the shakshuka was really good and that you should try it. She paused. And then I said, I hoped you were doing okay. That was it. That was all. 14 months of silence, and then the most understated sentence she could have possibly sent. That's very you, I said. I'm not going to just show up and announce myself. I would have wanted you to. The monitor beside registered an opinion. She glanced at it, then away. You don't have to say things like that right now. I'm saying it because it's true. She turned the granola bar over in her hands. You have a head injury, minor concussion. I'm still responsible for my statements. Her lips pressed together, fighting it. You don't know that. I know I've been wanting to say it for a year. The room got quiet again, but differently. She set the granola bar on the table, beside my water cup, and looked at me properly for the first time since she'd come in. I should have told you I was back, she said. I kept thinking I'd figure out what I wanted to say first. I spent 5 weeks figuring it out. What did you figure out? She tucked one foot under the other knee, the way she used to sit on my couch. Some part of my chest recognized the posture before my brain caught up. That I was still angry at you, she said, and that I'd stopped being angry at the right things. I was angry that you didn't ask me to stay. I think I'd forgotten that I didn't ask you to ask me. She said it carefully, like she'd practiced it. I gave you a feeling and called it a test. That wasn't fair. I should have said something anyway. You should have. But I wasn't exactly making it easy. We almost smiled at the same time. Almost. The door opened and Kezia came back through, checked the monitor, asked me a few questions about sensation in my shoulder, told me the scan results would be back in the next hour. When she left again, the room settled. Why Vancouver? I asked. Not accusatory. I'd wondered it for a year in a way I hadn't let myself actually ask. Celeste looked at the window. Outside, it was the flat gray of a February afternoon in Ontario, the specific gray that means the snow is deciding what to do next. Because it was the best program, she said, and because part of me wanted to prove I could. You proved it. I know. She picked up the granola bar again, turned it over, put it down. I also know that I cried in a parking lot in Vancouver on our anniversary because I missed your dumb transit van in my driveway, and the way you leave your boots in exactly the wrong place, and I'd eaten a whole bag of ketchup chips by myself, watching a show we were supposed to watch together. I was quiet. I don't know why I told you that, she said. I do. She looked at me sideways. Because you want me to know it wasn't nothing, I said. Even though you had to go. Her breath caught. She looked down at her hands. It wasn't nothing, she said quietly. The afternoon light shifted. Somewhere down the hall, a cart wheeled past. The radiator near the window ticked steadily, the way old hospital radiators do, like they're keeping time for the building. I want to hear about Vancouver, I said. The program, what you built, all of it, Graham, not because I'm trying to win something, because I actually want to know who you are now, not just who I remember. She lifted her eyes to mine and held them there for a long moment, checking for something. Whatever she found, she seemed to accept it. It was really good, she said. Her voice changed, went warmer, opened a little. We did this project in second year, redesigning a community garden space in East Van. Low-income neighborhood, the city had basically abandoned it. We had to consult with the residents, do soil testing, drainage planning, the whole thing. She paused. I stayed until 2 a.m, 3 nights in a row, and I wasn't even annoyed about it. I just wanted it to be right. That sounds exactly like you. The finished thing was, it was really something. The residents had this little ceremony when it opened. There was a woman there, maybe 70. She'd grown up 3 blocks away. She cried. Celeste's voice went soft. That was the moment I understood what I was doing and why. I watched her while she said it, the way her hands moved, the way she forgot to be careful for a minute. I'm really glad you went, I said. She stopped. I know that sounds wrong coming from me, I said, But I'm glad you got to do that. Celeste looked at me for a long, careful moment. Then she said, "Why did you never say any of this before?" "Because I was afraid saying it out loud would make it permanent." She exhaled slowly. It wasn't an angry exhale. It was the kind you do when something you already knew finally gets confirmed by someone else. "You need to go to therapy," she said. "I know. I'm not joking. I know. I already looked into it. I've been on a wait list at a place on Dunlop since November." I paused. Which is maybe why the universe felt Dunlop Street was an appropriate location for all of this. Her lips curved, barely. But it was real. She picked up the granola bar and held it out. I took it, opened it, took a bite. It tasted like something that had been made with good intentions and limited resources. "Well," she asked. "Aggressively adequate." She laughed, surprised, short, real, and I held onto the sound of it in the back of my mind like something I'd been missing from a set. The afternoon passed in pieces. Her aunt came back with actual coffee, Tim Hortons, because Ruth Ann LeClaire would not be caught paying $4 for something with an Italian name when there was a perfectly good franchise downstairs. My mother arrived from Collingwood 40 minutes later, wind-chapped and determined, and made a sound when she saw Celeste that was so intensely meaningful I had to look at the ceiling. Celeste stood up to hug her. My mother held on a beat too long. The scan results came back fine. The shoulder would need physio. The rib needed time. The wrist was bruising, as predicted. The concussion was mild, which meant they wanted to keep me overnight, but weren't worried about permanent damage. The police officer who came to take my statement was a quiet guy named Sergeant Beaumont. Patient, unhurried, the kind who made you feel like whatever you remembered was enough. I told him what I could. The light changing on Dunlop, the van starting to slide, my hands on the wheel, then nothing. He nodded, asked a few more questions, said they'd be in touch. After he left, Celeste sat back down. We'd been talking for 3 hours by then, on and off, between nurses and my mother, and one very thorough visit from a physiotherapist who was deeply enthusiastic about explaining rotator cuff mechanics to a man who'd just been in a van accident. Celeste had stayed through all of it. She'd moved the chair 3 inches closer at some point, and I didn't think she'd noticed. "You should go home," I said. "You've been here since 2:15, she said. "It's fine. You drove from Barrie to Barrie." "I live here, Graham." "Right." I looked at the ceiling. "I keep forgetting that." "Forgetting what?" "That you came back, that you're here." Then, "I'm here." 2 words. Nothing complicated. The monitor beside me kept its own counsel about what my heart did. "Celeste." I turned my head to look at her. "I'd like to do better at saying the things I mean when I mean them, instead of waiting until I'm sedated in a hospital bed." I stopped. "I'm not asking you to decide anything right now. I let out a slow breath. "I'm saying it. Out loud. On the record." Her hand was on the bed rail. I put mine next to it, not on it, just near. She looked at our hands for a long moment. Then she turned hers over and let her fingers rest against mine. Careful, warm. The careful kind of warm that knows it's making a decision. "I moved back to Barrie because of the job offer," she said. "A firm on Collier Street, not because of you. I want to be clear about that. I know, but I thought about you when I decided to call." Her thumb moved once across my knuckles. "I thought about the parking lot in Vancouver, and the ketchup chips." I turned my palm up. She kept her hand where it was. "What was the show?" I asked. She looked at me. "The one you watched without me." Something cracked open in her expression. She pressed her lips together. "Schitt's Creek. From the beginning." "Celeste. We were saving that." "I know." She sounded genuinely guilty. "I watched all 6 seasons and I cried at the finale, and I was so angry that you weren't there, and also so angry at myself that I let it be a thing we were saving instead of just watching it while we had the time." I thought about that. About all the things we'd been saving. "We could watch it again," I said. "I know all the words, so do I now. My cousin made me watch it last spring." She stared at me. "You've seen it?" "All of it. Twice, actually. The second time on purpose." "Did you cry at the finale?" "I'm not going to answer that." "Graham, my shoulder hurts." She laughed again, and this time it lasted longer, and she leaned forward until her forehead was in her hand, and her shoulders were shaking with it, and I watched her and thought, there she is, the specific version of her I had spent 14 months trying not to miss. My mother appeared in the doorway, took one look at us, and silently retreated like a woman who understood timing. Eventually, Celeste straightened up and wiped under her eye with the back of her wrist. You did cry. The roses bloomed, I said. What was I supposed to do? She shook her head slowly. Her hand was still in mine. It was almost 9 o'clock. The ward had gone quiet around us. That specific hospital quiet that isn't peaceful so much as purposeful. A whole building focused on the business of keeping people here a little longer. There's a thing, I said, that I want to say. She went still. I think I made loving me feel like a lot of waiting, I said. Waiting for me to say things. Waiting for me to decide things. Waiting for me to be ready. I looked at our hands. I don't want you to have to wait anymore. I'm not saying that to rush you. I'm saying it because it's what I should have figured out 2 years ago, and I'm only figuring it out now, and I think you deserve to know I know it. Celeste's eyes were bright. She didn't try to blink it back this time. You couldn't have told me that before you drove into a median, she said. Apparently, I needed the incentive. She made a sound. Half laugh, half something else entirely. She squeezed my hand and didn't let go. I've been writing things down, she said quietly. In Vancouver, things I wanted to say to you. Pages, eventually. She shrugged one shoulder. I couldn't send them. They always seemed like too much. They weren't. You haven't read them, Celeste. I waited until she looked at me. Nothing you could say to me is too much. She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she reached over and tucked a corner of the blanket more securely over my arm, the way you do something practical when you don't have words for what you're feeling. Okay, she said softly. One thing. I waited. I missed you every single day, she said. I didn't let myself say it because it felt weak, and I was angry, and I'd worked really hard to build something out there. But it was true. I missed you every day, and I'm tired of not telling you that. My throat was not available for comment. Say something, she said. Give me a second. Grom, I'm composing myself. You're terrible at this, I know. I turned my head to look at her properly. I missed you too. Every day. I missed your opinions about things, and the way you organize the dishwasher, and the fact that you name your plants and then feel bad when they die, and the way you always have a granola bar in your coat even in February, and… I stopped. I missed you in all the ordinary ways that don't make good speeches. I just missed you. Celeste's chin wobbled once before she stopped it. That was actually a pretty good speech. Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my reputation. She leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. Warm, close, deliberate, not accidental. When she sat back, she didn't look embarrassed. She looked like someone who'd made a decision. One dinner, she said, when you're out of here and your shoulder doesn't look like that. One dinner. No expectations, she gestured vaguely between us. See? One dinner, I agreed. And you go to your therapy appointments, already scheduled, and you stop letting 3 days pass without saying the thing you need to say, working on it, and you don't let me do all the brave parts alone. That one landed quiet and clean. I turned her hand over and pressed my lips to her palm. I won't, I said. She didn't pull away. We stayed like that until my mother came back with 2 teas from the machine downstairs, the kind in the styrofoam cups that are more promise than beverage. She handed one to Celeste without being asked. Celeste took it. Ruth Ann materialized behind her, carrying a bag from the Tim Hortons downstairs with a cheese croissant in it, which she put on my tray with the authority of a woman who doesn't believe in hospital food. Eat, she said. I'm touched by the care, I said. You are very annoying and I'm glad you're alive, she said, and sat down. The 4 of us stayed together in that small room, while outside the windows, the February dark settled in over the city, and inside the machines kept their quiet count, and Celeste's knee was against the side of my bed, and the tea was bad, and the croissant was good, and I felt, for the first time in a very long time, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. They discharged me on a Tuesday morning with a sling, a referral for physio, and a handout about concussion symptoms in a font sized for someone's grandmother. Celeste drove me home in her car, a Subaru Outback, practical, 4 winter tires, a reusable shopping bag in the back that said, I'd rather be composting, which was exactly the kind of thing she would own completely unironically. She walked me to my door. She looked at the front steps, the second one that had needed fixing since October, the boot tray just inside that currently held 4 boots and 0 pairs. You still haven't fixed that step, she said. It's on the list. It was on the list in August. It's moved up. She smiled, her breath visible in the cold air. She tucked her hands into her pockets. I'll call you, she said. About dinner. Once your arm looks better. Or you could come in. Have a tea that's better than the hospital kind. I looked at the door. I have a good kettle now. I bought it after you left because you always made fun of my old one. She tilted her head. You bought a new kettle because of me. I bought a new kettle because the old one was inadequate. You were the one who made that clear. Her expression went warm, careful, considering. She came inside. We had tea at my kitchen table, real tea in the mugs she used to use, while the radiator knocked and the snow started up again outside. She told me about the Collier Street firm, the project she was starting in the spring, a residential garden space for a townhouse development north of the city. I told her about the new crew, the commercial job I'd landed in the fall, the permits that had driven me slowly insane for 2 months, and the deep personal satisfaction when they'd finally come through. At one point, I got up to get more water, and she reached over without thinking and straightened the sugar bowl to parallel with the edge of the table. Then she noticed what she'd done and looked up. I was already smiling. I didn't mean to, she said. I know. Celeste, it's fine. She settled back in her chair. She was still in her coat. She hadn't quite committed to staying yet, even though she'd been here 40 minutes. I didn't say anything about the coat. Some things you let people do in their own time. We watched the snow fall for a while, in a silence that wasn't sharp at all. I have the pages, she said eventually. The things I wrote, in a notebook. I waited. I'm not going to read them to you, she said quickly. They're embarrassing. And there's one entry in October that's pretty uncharitable to you, and I don't want that to be the thing we're talking about. I deserve the uncharitable entry. You do. But not on day 2. She looked at me sideways. Maybe day 12? I'll mark the calendar. She smiled, slowly. Day 12, she repeated, like she was agreeing to something larger. She stayed another hour. When she left, she paused on the porch, turned back, and kissed me properly this time. Real, careful, both hands on my face, my good arm around her, the snow coming down sideways because this was Ontario in February, and nothing about timing is ever perfect here. When she pulled back, her eyes were serious. Don't drive on black ice anymore, she said. Solid advice. I mean it. I know. I tightened my arm, just briefly. I'm not going anywhere. She looked at me for a moment. Then she nodded, like that was what she needed to hear, and walked down the steps, careful of the second one, to her car. 6 months later, she designed a small garden for the side yard of my house, the narrow strip between the fence and the kitchen window that had been dead gravel since I moved in. She drew it up in an afternoon, brought it over like it was nothing, and spent a weekend in June installing perennials that would come back every year without being asked. I fixed the porch step in April. I was in therapy by March. Some weeks I was better at it than others, but I showed up, which is the first thing my therapist said, and the thing I still have to remind myself is actually half the work. We watched Schitt's Creek again, from the beginning, this time together. I cried at the finale again. She pretended she didn't notice. I told her I saw her notice. She refilled my tea and said nothing. That felt right to me. Ruth Ann came for dinner the night Celeste finally left a drawer's worth of things at my place. She brought tourtière. She sat across the table and looked at the two of us and said, with complete sincerity, that she had waited a long time to eat dinner at a table where both people deserved to be there. Celeste told her she was being dramatic. Ruth Ann told her she was being a Leclerc, which she said like it meant the same thing. I thought about that night in the hospital room, the beeping, the bad tea, the granola bar, the specific sound of Celeste saying I'm here, like it was something small, when it was the most important thing anyone had said to me in over a year. Some things you have to almost lose before you understand what you're holding. I understand. And every morning when I drove down Dunlop Street on the way to a job, I drove the way a person drives when they know exactly what they have to get home to.